So, today I figure I'm gonna go ahead and go over this House Bill number in Missouri, number 1674. Um, so yeah, kind of going over this. So first thing to go ahead and mention, this is a bill. It's not like an actual. It's introduced as a thing to be discussed. It's not like a thing that's in effect or anything. You know what I'm saying? Uh, yeah. In the it's a bill to be voted on. Um, yeah. But anyway, second thing I should go ahead and probably talk about. So what I'm probably gonna go ahead and do here is I'm gonna go ahead and go through this, read sections, and kind of like discuss. So yeah, because this is kind of like talking about all this various kind of like anti-trans bills and like kind of being like, okay, so what exactly do the bills say? What exactly is the issue with them? So, without any further ado, let's just get into doing this. Okay. So, this is kind of where it starts really doing anything. This section shall be known and may be cited as the Employee Restroom and Locker Room Access Act. So, specifically, it is regarding employees. Yeah. Restroom use. Um, and it is very kind of specific to trans people, but we'll get into that later. Restroom and locker room stuff. Then, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary contained in Chapter 213, except as otherwise provided under this section, the employee restroom and locker room access act shall not be construed to apply to any other provisions under this chapter or construed to bar or limit any other action under any provisions of this chapter. It's legal jargon. Not really. Yeah. Let's see. As used in this section, following terms mean employee any person performing work or service of any kind or chapter. Or character for an employer within the state of Missouri, regardless of whether the employee is paid or unpaid. So yeah, including like freaking interns, I guess, who are not being paid, which is a whole nother issue. But yeah, as anyway, employer, any person or entity employing one or more employees within the state of Missouri, including a public employer, as defined under blah blah blah. Gender identity, a person's internal sense of self as male, female, neither, both, or somewhere along the gender spectrum. Sure. Yeah, okay. Hostile work environment, a workplace in which unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature or conduct based on gender identity or sexual orientation is sufficiently severe or pervasive to unreasonably interfere with an employee's work performance or create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So this is kind of where we start to get into territory where it's like actually bringing up the issues that it's trying to hate on trans people, basically. But yeah. So the idea here is that what they're trying to bring up is with a hostile that any time that there is or conduct based on gender identity, yeah, based on gender identity. And what exactly do they mean by that? Not really talked about at this point. It will be later. Oh, trust me, it will be. But yeah, they're saying that just kind of existing. We'll get into it later. It'll say it later. I'll talk about it more later. But what they're trying to say here is that just being trans and existing in a bathroom based on your gender identity and not whatever you were assigned at birth creates a hostile work environment, which is not the case. Obviously, like, existing in a bathroom does not make it a hostile work environment for cis people. Like, it doesn't. Like, that's insane. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and go on. To kind of go ahead and yeah, you know what? Just to go ahead and go on a little bit about that. So the reason why it's insane, right? So I understand that a lot of people, a lot of cis women out there, right? You think of the bathroom and you think safe place. This is a place where I can go to escape issues. Like if someone is being a creeper, right? You can go there, it's a safe place, you don't have to worry about them following you into there generally. Your concern is that if you allow trans people in there, you are going to have people who may not be trans, like, kind of go in there and do things, which is, you know, obviously that would not be good. Obviously, it would not be good if people were to go into the bathroom and harass women, trans, cis, anyone. It's not good for anyone to go into bathrooms and harass people. It's just not. In fact, it's something that we've kind of all agreed on a long time ago. There are laws very specifically in place against harassing people. The issue with a bill that would make, especially a bill like this, where it would make going into the bathroom an issue, is that, like, you're not going to be blocking people who would be criminals and harass people, because those people do not care about the law. They don't care. The only people you're going to hurt are people who are going in there for the sole purpose of going to the bathroom. That's the only group of people you're gonna hurt by making a law ban trans people from being able to use the bathroom based on gender identity. But anyway, we're gonna continue on. Yeah. So, right. A locker room, any facility used for the purpose of changing clothes or storing personal belongings. Term may include, but is not limited to, changing area, changing room, or shower room. Alright. Multiple occupancy restroom or changing area, an area or a place of employment designed or designated to be used by more than one individual at a time, where individuals may be in various stages of undress in the presence of other individuals. The term may include, but is not limited to, a restroom, locker room, changing room, or a shower room. Okay. So, I think that it's kind of important here to address a few things. When you're talking about changing in a bathroom, generally people don't, I would say that most people aren't going to change in a bathroom unless you're talking about a locker room. If you're talking about a locker room, fair enough. But, like, if you're talking about a bathroom, not a lot of people are going to be changing there unless they're, like, in a stall. In a stall, you are going to have the privacy that you are wanting to have. This is kind of where I start to have... This is another point where I have some issues with this bill, because it is... it doesn't make a lot of sense to go ahead and just say, oh, well, trans people can't be in this bathroom because cis women might be changing. Okay, but like, if people are going to be changing, typically they're going to be in a stall. And like, I do want to stress that, like, there are people who are like, not just, well, obviously there's trans people, right? But there's also like a whole other, there's a whole slew of LGBT plus people, right? In the modern era, I think I speak for a lot of us younger people nowadays, just people in general, in a lot of cases, like, you don't typically change out in the open in a bathroom. Because, like, you don't. It's just not a good idea. Like, it's just not. You don't. Changing in the open is not a thing that we like to do. Because, like, people are attracted to people. Like, you know? It just feels weird to provide that kind of environment, you know what I'm saying? It seems weird to change when you're around people who might be interested in you, unless, you know, that's a situation that you have agreed upon, you know? Like, if you and a person are like, you know each other, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, you know, I consent to like seeing this, you know, sure, okay, fair enough. But most people don't just get naked in front of strangers. Like, it's just not a thing. Like, I mean, I'm sure that there are people out there who do. But if you do, like, that's not on other people. That's your choice that you've done that. That you're doing that. And that's not, I don't see that as a thing where it seems really weird to try and say, well, people might be changing. Okay, why? Like, people are going to be going into the bathroom for one reason. Most people, when they go to the bathroom, their goal with going into the bathroom is to go to the bathroom. That's it. It's not to be changing, it's not to go ahead and get naked, it's not to go ahead and, like, throw some kind of wild fucking party up in there. You go in, you go to the bathroom, in your own little private stall, especially in the women's restroom. Like, in the men's restroom, I will admit the urinals have had a whole weird situation. But in the women's restroom, right? Which is the main reason why a lot of these bills are brought up. Because there's all this scare of, oh, men in women's restrooms, oh no, you know, that whole argument. Like, the concern there is about people who will be going into, like, sectioned off stalls. Like, people are not going to see anything. Like, it's not. I'm just saying. They are not. Like, it's not. It would be an extremely bizarre set of circumstances that would lead to anyone seeing anyone not clothed in there. Like, it's not normal for that to happen. Anyway, I'm gonna go on. Sex, the physical condition of being male or female based on genetics and physiology. Yeah. Physiology, as identified on the individual's original birth certificate. Yeesh. The original, it's blah blah. The General Assembly hereby finds the following: requiring employees to share restroom or locker room facilities with members of the opposite sex can create a hostile work environment. So here's the issue, right? This just has, right off the bat, having employees who are cis use the bathroom around trans people. They're going with that the existence of trans people in restrooms based on gender identity will create a hostile work environment. It's crazy talk. It is in the public interest to ensure that all employees have access. Yeah, I'm continuing reading it here. Have access to restroom and locker room facilities that correspond to. This is another pet peeve that I have with a lot of these documents. It's a lot easier to just say there than his or her. It really is. You can just say there. It's really not hard. In fact, it is fewer keys on the keyboard. You really don't need to use his or her here. It's not necessary. It really isn't. But, whatever. But anyway, correspond to his or her biological sex. So, in the public interest to ensure that all employees have access to restroom and locker room facilities that correspond to his or her biological sex. Honestly, big disagree on this because it doesn't. I don't really feel as though this is really a thing. Is it in the public interest to ensure that all employees have access to bathrooms based purely on biological sex? No. I don't think that is indeed in the public interest. There isn't really an argument made here. It just states it, which is kind of not great. Anyway, the General Assembly hereby declares that it is the public policy of the state to prohibit, ban employers from requiring employees to share multiple occupancy restrooms or changing areas or locker room facilities with members of the opposite sex. So basically, yeah. This bill would say, yeah, having bathrooms at a workplace, any employer would have to essentially force trans people to use bathrooms based on what they were assigned at birth as opposed to gender identity. And I do want to mention, I am very much specifically talking a lot more on the bathroom side of things. A lot of this time while they're talking about locker room facilities, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit more about that. So with locker rooms, it's a little bit more of a nuanced discussion. But here's the thing, right? Rather than trying to block particular types of women or men from using bathrooms based on gender identity, I think what would be better is to try and figure out ways of increasing privacy. Because I do think that it is good to have more privacy, right? I think we can all agree on that. We don't want to just randomly walk into bathrooms and be like, seeing a whole bunch of, locker rooms and see a whole bunch of, we don't want to see a whole bunch of strangers nude. Like, generally, that's not a thing that people want to do. I would say that having better privacy is absolutely something that we should be looking towards. But that's not what this bill is. That's not what any of these bills are. It's very specifically trying to block trans people from using locker rooms or bathrooms. And I do think that it's important to also mention these bills don't make a difference between trans people who have medically transitioned, like, completely, to the point where, like, they have upstairs, downstairs, everything. They are indistinguishable from people who are cis. This does not make any kind of, like, any kind of differentiation between those two on this. Okay, actually, looking at it further, it does. This specific bill does actually talk a little bit about the medical procedure, but a lot of these bills don't. And the issue there is, like, yeah, well, I won't discuss that point any further, since for this bill in particular, it's not really an issue. But I do want to bring it up simply because it's an issue with a lot of a discussion around trans people in locker rooms, because it just feels weird whenever that ends up happening. Whenever they just kind of be like, trans people can't use this locker room, yada yada, because, oh no, can't do it, they were assigned this at birth, it seems weird. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and just move on. But yes, no employee shall require an employee to share a restroom or locker room facility with an employee of the opposite sex. So this is basically just reiterating what I was saying before. An employee may provide a single occupancy restroom or locker room facility. Yeah, sure. Designed as yeah. I am not speaking words right now. That's okay. But anyway, that are designated as unisex. Okay, so that was here. Yeah. So here, an employer may provide single occupancy restrooms or locker rooms. That's great and all. I do appreciate the idea, right? The idea is that you would have a gender-neutral bathroom. And that's cool But the vast majority of workplaces don't have single occupancy restrooms. And like lots of workplaces do not have single occupancy restrooms. And the ones that do often have them sectioned off based on, gender identity. Well, not gender identity under this bill, but under this bill it would be whatever you were assigned at birth. But in a lot of cases, they break the restrooms up by gender. I don't really see a situation where employers are going to suddenly start building restrooms specifically to be more accommodating. It would be nice if that were how things worked, but it's not really. And along with that, part of the issue is that, like, if you have restrooms that are for male, female, and then a third option that is gender neutral, anytime that anyone tries to go to that bathroom, they're gonna out themselves. And that's not always safe for a person to do. That's really all there is to say about that one. Anyways, moving on. Employer males provide gender-neutral bathrooms. Yeah, it's basically what we're talking about there. In addition to facilities that are designated for single-sex use, right. So that's kind of going on with the whole gender-neutral restrooms thing. Moving on, it shall be unlawful employment practice for any person or entity to discriminate against any individual on the basis of sex in the use of employee restrooms. Okay. So, I don't know that I necessarily disagree with this particular point, right? So making it unlawful for employers to discriminate against individuals on the basis, like banning discrimination based on sex, yeah, absolutely, that's a good thing. But the issue is the context it's in. I have no problem with that individual statement on its own. I have issue with the idea that it is trying to include banning trans people from using bathrooms into this. And here's where I was talking about regarding the locker room thing, where I kind of suddenly stopped and was like, okay, well, actually, in this specific bill, it does. So it does have a medical exception. A medical exception to this section shall apply to an employee who has completed a full medical procedure to change his or her sex, and he or she may use the restroom that corresponds to his or her gender identity, regardless of whether the employee's birth certificate reflects the employee's gender identity after transition. Okay, so I get the idea. It is seemingly more inclusive, right? And it is better in terms of, say, things like locker rooms, right? But there is a huge difference between just saying, we want to ban trans people from using the locker room, and saying, we want to ban trans people from using the bathroom or locker room. People can generally, in a lot of cases, people can bypass locker rooms, right? They don't necessarily need to use the locker room. So, like, you go to the pool, you can just be in your swimsuit, be 100% ready, go to the pool, boom. You start swimming, not a problem. Let's say that you're in school. You can just go a different route other than through the locker room. You don't necessarily need to go through the locker room. You can just change elsewhere. You can deal with things elsewhere. You don't have to be in the locker room. The issue comes from when you start talking about bathrooms. Because when you start talking about bathrooms and banning bathroom use, where exactly is a trans person supposed to go to the bathroom if they're working a shift? The only option, if this kind of bill would be put into place, would be going into a bathroom based on gender assigned at birth. And the thing is, when you do that, you become subject to... You are at an extreme risk of sexual assault and harassment. It is 100% a thing that frequently happens. Trans people using bathrooms and then being assaulted, either sexually or, honestly, a lot of times just physically. It's not cool, it's not great. So, yeah, basically your options as a trans person are either don't go to the bathroom during a shift, which, for a lot of shifts, that's just not possible. In general, that's just not a thing that, like, you can just declare. You can't just be like, oh no, this particular group of people can't use the bathroom while they're at work, but everyone else can. You can't just do that. Like, that's not... That is, in and of itself, discrimination. But beyond that, the only other option would be to go into a place that is actively high risk for trans people. It doesn't seem like a good plan. That is... Yeah. It essentially makes it so that trans people would have to work jobs that would have short enough shifts that they could not go to the bathroom during the entirety of their shift. That would be the only possible way to not deal with a lot of this stuff. The only other option would be to just not work, which you can't just not work in the world that we live in today. You have to have a job in order to survive. So what a bill like this effectively does is it makes it so that it is more or less not possible to live there. as a trans person. Whatever state would have a bill like this in effect, you basically just can't live there. If you're trans and haven't yet completed your medical procedure. Which a lot of trans people, like, number one, getting that done is not something you can just do on a whim. It is not something that is super cheap. You don't just do it out of the blue. You're not gonna be... It's not something where you are like, I figured out I'm trans, next day you're gonna have your, medical procedure go through. Like, that's not how it works. You're talking about a medical expenditure that is like thousands of dollars, like tens of thousands of dollars, oftentimes. Yeah, it's like possible to afford, but like it is going to take years for anyone to be able to, for the vast majority of people, it's gonna take a while to be able to save that much money. You aren't gonna just be able to do it out of the blue. How are you going to attain the money for a medical procedure if you can't work? You know? You can't. So, yeah. Basically, if this... Yeah, as I was saying, if this kind of bill goes into effect, you just can't live there. Not on a permanent basis. Like, you might be able to go ahead and reside there for a temporary, for a small period of time where you're, like, visiting, family members and stuff. But you wouldn't be able to live in a state like this as a trans person. But anyway, moving on. General exception to this section shall apply to any employee who requires and requests assistance for using the restroom or locker room facilities, and to any employee who provides assistance in the proper use of such facilities. Right. So basically, this is saying, hey, if there is an employee who, so let's say that there's a person who needs help using the restroom. There are plenty of people who do need help using the restroom. For various reasons, medical typically, if they're like, old and no longer can do it on their own. There are plenty of other situations besides just old age, but you get the point. There are people who need assistance to use the bathroom. This allows for an employee to aid in that regardless of gender identity and whatever they were assigned at birth, which, okay, I guess. Sure. Anyway, kind of goes on. The Missouri Commission on Human Rights shall enforce the provisions of this section. Any employee who believes that his or her employer has violated this section may file a complaint with the Commission and proceed under the provisions of sections blah 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 blah. If a Commission finds an employer has violated this section, the Commission may order the employer to take corrective action, including paying the employee damages for the harm suffered due to the violation of this section. Yeah, the harm of seeing a trans person exist in their bathroom. Oh no, the horror. 2, reinstating the employee to his or her, or you could just use their Job or position if they had been fired or demoted. Right. Okay, sure. Providing other equitable relief. Okay. Any person or entity who willfully violates this section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. So yeah, basically criminalizing trans people who would use the bathroom based on gender identity. Yeah, that's super cool and great. Yeah. Woo. And upon conviction thereof, shall be liable for a civil penalty of not more than $250 for each violation. So yeah, basically being like, yeah, if you want to use the bathroom at your workplace, well, you gotta be willing to fork up $250 or whatever, you know. Cool, great. That's fantastic, you know. Yeah, we all love that. Can you imagine, like, I'm gonna imagine that, like, there are a lot of people out there, right? Like, if you are listening to this, right? Let's say that you're like a cis person and you don't understand, like, it based on you don't quite get it, right? Like, you've never really had to worry about the bathroom. Like, not being allowed to use the bathroom. You've just kind of been like, I just go to this workplace and I just go to the bathroom. It's not a problem. Can you imagine, like, having a situation where, like, if you were to you have a choice whenever you're at work that you have to choose between going to a bathroom that is safe for you and being charged like $250 for that, and, you know, having a misdemeanor on your record, or going into a bathroom that is actively dangerous for you. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people are going to, like, if it's just not a good situation. Like, it's not good no matter what path, you know? It's not. It doesn't help people. It just hurts people. And that's really the issue, you know? And then, if any provision of a section or application to any persons or circumstance is held invalid, such determination shall not affect provisions of applications of this section that may be given effect without the invalid provision of application, and to that end, provisions of this section are severable. Okay, yeah. So, part of why this bill in particular is interesting to me in particular is because this bill goes ahead and, whereas a lot of prior anti-trans bathroom bills and whatnot relies on the ability of people to determine whether or not someone, you know, looks trans, on how to enforce it, this one would actually have some degree of enforceability, because the thing is that, like, an employer would have those records. They would know whether or not a trans person is trans, typically. There are some exceptions, like if the person has, like, fully medically transitioned, but, you know, obviously those people are exempted anyways through this bill. But for people who have not yet, like, fully transitioned, like, this bill basically makes it impossible for a trans person to use a bathroom at work. Because, yeah, you have two options. And neither of them are good. Yeah, I understand the desire to create a place where people will feel safe in the bathroom, right? A lot of people, whenever they start trying to argue that trans people should be banned from women's restrooms, they'll go ahead and they'll argue that it is not something where they hate trans people, it's something where they want to protect women, cis women in particular, but they don't clarify that because you know. But yeah. They'll go ahead and say that it's purely to protect women, right? The thing is that, like, when you're talking about these situations, the people that are the people who would be a problem for cis women in women's bathrooms are people who do not care about the law, and they have plenty of ways to get into women's restrooms regardless of these kinds of bills. There are going to be people who are maintenance workers. There are going to be people who are plumbers. There are going to be people who are just a wide variety. I mean, even in this bill, right? An exception was made for people who would be aiding other people using the bathroom in there, right? There are all kinds of exceptions that people can and would use if they were the type of people who would harm women. They don't need the excuse of trying to claim that they're trans in order to do it. There are plenty of other ways that they manage to get in. I'm not saying that it's good, because it's not. I don't like that. It doesn't make the world a nice, safe place. It is not great. It's not ideal. And I understand the fear of people breaking in and harassing and assaulting people. It's not cool. It is absolutely not cool. But the enemy in this case is not trans people. You're not going to prevent sexual assault from happening by banning trans people from the bathroom. The only thing that you're going to do is harm a group of people that don't need to be harmed. It doesn't help you. And that's kind of my point on this. It just doesn't make sense to put in a bill like this. But anyways, that's all I really wanted to go ahead and talk about. Sorry about any random ramblings on some of this. There were some sections where I just kind of went off and didn't quite, it is, it is how it is. But anyway, I'll go ahead and shut up now. But, yeah, this is, one of those bills that are proposed in Missouri. And again, I do want to go ahead and make sure I mention this is not something that is being made into law. This is something that has been proposed. People would be voting for or against it at some point in the House. Who knows how exactly it'll go down in reality. If it were to pass the House, it would also need to pass the Senate, then it would also need to not be vetoed by the governor. It's a whole process. The legal system is a whole mess. But I want to go ahead and discuss bills like this because being a trans person, I have a lot of knowledge about all this stuff. I have a lot of knowledge about how it would impact trans people. And unlike a lot of these politicians, I actually have put in a lot of thought on what exactly the issues are, what exactly is trying to be stopped with these bills. And the thing is that what they're trying to prevent is people harming women. That's the main goal here. They're trying to prevent people harming women, specifically cis women. And I get it. I do get it. It is a valuable thing to want, but you can't you are not going to make cis women safer by punching a group that is not harming them. There are, I'm sure, some trans people who are people who commit crimes, right? Like, there are going to be some trans people who do sexually assault people, but it is generally, like, really rare for that to be the case. And, like, you can see that. Like, in news stories and anything. Like, if there were a lot of cases of trans people assaulting women in the bathroom, it would be all over the news. Every time that would happen, it would be all over the news. But for the most part, it doesn't. Like, there are a few cases, I'm sure, but it is extremely rare, like with any other portion of the population. It's not something that everyone does. You wouldn't ban people from shopping at the store. Like, you wouldn't ban all women in general from shopping at the store because you noticed that there are a few women who happen to shoplift. That's not really how things work. because you can't judge an entire group of people based on a select few in that group. So, anyways, my whole point with all this is just when you see bills like this, please understand that while they are designed with the idea in mind that they are to protect women, specifically cis women, while they are built with protection in mind, these bills don't actually do anything to protect. The only thing they do is harm people. Anyways, yes, yeah. I'll talk with you later. Don't die, have fun.